Good morning, everybody. Happy
Morning.
Thursday.
Morning.
Hope you all had a lovely commute into the Maryland Food Bank. Here's some back there. Thank you so much for coming in. This is actually a hybrid event, and so there are folks that are online. So today we'll be taking questions both in person and also online. So we're really trying to have hybrids to really be more inclusive to folks so that they can really benefit from this robust conversation that's going to happen. I also never like to introduce myself when I kick these off, so I'm going to do that today. I'm Elise Krickow. I'm the Chief Philanthropy Officer here at the Maryland Food Bank. I've had the pleasure of kind of sitting on the sidelines watching this be planned. Thanks to my wonderful team who has pulled this together. So I'm really excited about today's topic. I know that it's going to be robust. I know we're going to have a good conversation, so please don't hold back with your questions. But before we get into all of that, I want to make a few housekeeping announcements. So I will read now. First of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you to our supporters. We started these events, 3 years ago now, the Coffee Talk series. This is our fifth one. And this is our way of really connecting with our supporters to show you the impact of your philanthropy and how you're helping us move our work forward and helping us address the root causes of food insecurity while also still being able to provide nutritious food to our communities throughout the state. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you for your ongoing support. We were here before the pandemic. We were here definitely during the pandemic, and we continue to have a lot of need out there. And so philanthropic support is allowing us to do that. So I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. Also to our volunteers who show up almost every day to help us with our work too. So thank you much. Also, for our folks that are online, Kat Thomas is in the back. She's our Senior Director of Philanthropy. And so she's going to be managing the chat. So if you have questions, please put it into the Q&A and she will field those questions. And at the end, I'll make sure that your questions are asked. Also, we have coffee, tea, and goodies in the back. This is actually from our local company called Black Acres Roastery. And yay!
Yeah,
and they are a small, local Black-owned business that are deeply invested in our community and are beautifully aligned with our mission here at the Food Bank. This is our second time partnering with them, and you'll love their coffee. Haven't had it already. So we're pleased to support a local business as well.
Is that an invitation for more people to come in next time?
Yes, come in and have some coffee, tea, and good. All right. So now I want to introduce our speakers today. Hey, we're finally there. All right. So I'm going to start with Carmen. He is our president and CEO of the Food Bank, and he has been with us for 7 years now. Lucky 7. Right. And he joined us after a successful year in what we call the money banking side. And then he moved into the Food Bank after 29 years at M&T Bank, who's also a strong partner of ours. Today, Carmen is leading the Food Bank on an ambitious new movement that is not only feeding more people, but offering solutions that address the root causes of food insecurity. So we're really thrilled to have Carmen's leadership. We also have other leaders in the room with us who are helping us move this forward. And finally, the star of our show, Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III has been a catalyst for personal transformation and social change for more than 20 years. 20 years.
Yeah.
For nearly 14 years, he served as pastor of Pleasant Hope Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland. While there, he launched Oreda's Cross Freedom School, an educational program that celebrates African heritage and develops hands-on skills in youth. He later launched the Black Church Food Security Network, which advances food security and food sovereignty by co-creating Black food ecosystems anchored by Black congregations in partnership with Black farmers and accomplices. His work has garnered numerous awards and national recognition for his work. He serves on the board of many impactful organizations, such as Bread for the World, and is currently writing his first book entitled Nothing More Sacred: Radical Stories of Black Church Faith, Food, and Freedom. The book is scheduled to be published in spring 2024. So you heard it here. When will copies be ready?
Yes, I will drive them down myself.
All right. So come back, everybody.
Yes.
All right. I'll pick them up. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Carmen to kick off this wonderful conversation. And thank you so much for being here. We're so excited.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate it. It's hard to believe this is our 5th session.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
it's an honor to have you as this, on this signature or milestone moment for the Coffee with
Oh.
Carmen, our 5th session. As Elise said, we started this several years ago as a way to begin to highlight organizations that are doing incredible things in our community, right? And for them to talk a little bit about what they're doing, but for you to hear not only their story, but in ways in which we, as 2 organizations having hopefully significant impact for neighbors all across our state, are finding ways to work together, right? Our ability to try to solve some of the challenges that all of us are facing in our neighborhoods is more and more, we've got to find more and more opportunities to leverage the resources, leverage the strengths, leverage the focuses of several organizations, bring them together as one. This is a situation where hopefully 1 + 1 = 3 or 4. Right, if it's done right. And so hopefully you get a chance to learn a little bit about the incredible work you're doing, which I'm honored to have you here today, and a little bit of how the Maryland Food Bank is working together with organizations like yours. And so I am thrilled to have you here today. The energy level in the building went up as soon as you walked in the front door, frankly. You've been coming in here about for 2 years. Frankly, this is the first time we've met today. We've had a couple of conversations via Zoom, as most people tend to communicate these days. But the buzz that every time Heber comes in the building is infectious, and it's really cool, and it lifts us all up organizationally. And so I was incredibly thrilled to have the opportunity to have this conversation. I'm not going to say anything about the fact that you met with the CEO of Feeding America, Claire Robin-O'Fonnell, before meeting with us. We're just going to let that go. Like, I don't want to start off on a bad foot here. Right? This has been such a positive relationship that so that is what it is. Yeah. Now you're in the house, and I thank you very much for that. This is my 2nd cup of coffee because the energy level that we're going to have today is going to be great, and I really appreciate all of you joining in person and online. And so with that, thank you.
Thank you so much, Carmen, and thank y'all for having me.
So at first, we talked briefly about kind of how we wanted to start, and we talked about potentially starting with the work you're doing today, but I don't think that is an appropriate place to start. I don't think it does it justice, because the journey is equally important, right? I mean, you didn't wake up one morning and say, "Hey, I'm going to just start this food network," right? That's right. And so maybe talk a little bit about that, please.
Sure. Well, as Elise shared in the introduction, I'm a pastor, and one of the things that every religious leader, no matter their particular faith tradition, has to be concerned about is being sensitive to and serving the needs of the members of their congregation who are facing various health challenges. And because of our position, we get an opportunity to gain access to privileged information about the things that we may not often broadcast off the rooftops about what's really going on with us. And that was a part of my journey in getting here. It really started with me visiting members of my congregation at that time during pastoral hospital visits. And of course, prayer is given, of course, scripture and encouragement. But while laying on those hospital beds, I'm also hearing stories. And some of those stories touched on why they were there in the first place. And I started to recognize a pattern in what I was hearing amongst the members of my congregation, that many of them were sharing stories that pointed to diet being a part of why they were there. And when I heard this pattern of these stories, my initial thought was to partner with a local market to just pipeline food into our church so that people would have what they needed. But there were some economic barriers to gaining access, but there was also some cultural disconnects that created chasms for really collaborative partnership around just getting food to the members of my church. And so in those moments, that journey taught me that the classic definition of food desert did not apply in that particular situation, because for us, and if anybody knows the Baltimore area, and particularly like the York Road, Northern Parkway area, there's the Belvedere Square, there's Giant, not too far. There are a number of places to get food, but there were some invisible barriers that I did not realize that were there until we started bumping up against some of them. And like I said, the cultural disconnect, the economic reality of it all. And so I did not want to lead the congregation into a partnership that at the end of the day did not feel like a real partnership, and one that costs a lot, not just financially, but a partnership that would cost a lot in the way of human dignity. And I think sometimes in my experience, even if something well-meaning, well-intentioned, and good is being done to help somebody else, if it comes at the expense of their human dignity, it costs too much. And so for us, we were pushed toward this idea of, okay, over here you can't afford it. Over here there's a disconnect culturally. But you know what? We do have some land right here at our church, and not a whole lot of land, but land maybe 3/4 of the size of this room. And we were driven toward this idea of growing the food that we needed on the land that we had right there in Baltimore. And Carmen, I've realized I'm a history nerd. I can nerd out on history really good. And I love the footnotes, not just like the headlines of stuff that's happened historically. I like digging down into the details of how stuff really happened. And so I was surprised when just something just didn't connect with, I didn't realize it until we started. I started going around the congregation saying, hey, y'all, let's start a garden to get the food that we need to address our health challenges. And I thought it was going to be the younger people that got off the pews first, you know, because at the time I was like 28, 29. I started pastoring at 28. And so I'm about maybe 28, 29 years old. I'm like the young social justice pastor. And I was like, the young people will come and we will follow. We will do great work. And they did come. They just came on the first day of the garden and they like never selfies and like, yeah, hey, look at me. Once they did it for the gram, it was over. It was like, okay, take care. But the people that stayed were the seniors. And I just didn't connect this historical dot. Many of the seniors of my church came to Baltimore in the 40s and 50s during what's called the Great Migration. And while I studied, learned, and that the part of in terms of the Great Migration touches my own family story, millions of African Americans leaving the South, going north and going west. That's a part of my family story and many of the family stories of the people I served at that church. I didn't connect the dot that many of these seniors grew up on farms. They knew about growing food. They lived closer to land. They had more of an agrarian upbringing, and that rhythm of living with the land was in their DNA. So even though they left the farm never left them. They were here in the city, but that farm, that kind of living still inside of them. And in fact, for many of them, every chance they got, they would go back down home and get the good food, real food down home.
Right.
Or if somebody else was going, they would say, hey, pick up family and bring it back.
Right.
So when I said garden, something reignited in the seniors. And it was the seniors who really stepped forward. And it was a lady named Sister Maxine Nicholas. She died in 2017, but she had been a member of the church for 50 some years and grew up on a farm with 8 brothers and sisters in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. She was the first one who stood up and said, I'm going to help the pastor. And I realized that she was the captain of the AARP club in the church. Because when she said, I'm going to do it,
then
all the seniors and this 1,500 square foot or something garden started churning out 1,200 pounds of produce a season. And I'm seeing these folks who know about farming maximize what we already had in our hand. Up to that point, though, I have Southern roots through my family, North Carolina and Virginia. I was born at Sinai Hospital and city all day. I thought you needed acres upon acres of land to do anything worthwhile and meaningful when it comes to food. But they taught me that no, sometimes it's not the amount of land, it's what you do with what you have. And that lesson has been like the sustainable fuel that has driven my growth, my journey, and the journey about organization.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us today.
Good session. That's how we top that.
No, I mean, so you talked about youth that you had expected they were going to lead that charge, right? So, and this is something we're facing. You know, we work through an incredible network of organizations all across our state who are serving their local communities, who have that local knowledge, who have those local relationships and have that level of trust to be able to serve their local communities. But what we're seeing is those are led by folks who are of age,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so our network over time is going to be interesting to see how that transforms, because it doesn't feel like, while there's a lot of conversation
Sure.
about people who are committed to doing this kind of work,
Yeah.
it doesn't always translate into the kind of commitment that we see in our network with partners. And we have some people in this room who volunteer in our facility every day,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
And so how are you seeing, are the youth rallying, if you will, that so there's a sustainable model that's starting to be created as it relates to these gardens that you've created in your network?
Yeah. So a few things came. I realized that the beautiful thing about gardening, and that one garden I just referenced at the church in Baltimore spread to other churches. And so now we're a national network of about 250 churches across the country that have gardens that are growing food on their land and really engaging food insecurity in a way that starts with, what do we have in our hand? I love this this quote by Cormac Russell, who writes a lot about asset-based community development. And he says, oftentimes groups start with the question, what's wrong? What's wrong? He said, flip that. Start with what's strong.
Mm.
And if you start with what's strong, oftentimes that fuel will take you much further than a deficit model, deficit-based thinking and model that says there's a problem here and we have to fix that problem. And so that the network has grown with that, because for all the other things that are challenges in historically marginalized communities, in the Black community, we have churches.
Mm.
We got churches sometimes that are side by side. They can overhear each other's services. And oftentimes those churches are sitting Monday through Saturday with all these assets, kitchens, classrooms, vans, that are going underutilized or not used at all. Now, and I'm talking about African-American churches, but we can easily, and y'all know this, we can take a much bigger brush and go across the faith community as a whole. That Monday through Saturday, for many of them, they're not utilizing what they have to that level. So here, to the youth piece, here's what we've been learning, the youth and young adult piece. This gardening work and this food security work has multiple front doors. And the front door of alleviating the suffering and the hunger that people are experiencing is a big, wide, rotating door that a lot of people rush through, and it's wonderful. There's another door that my young people taught me about, and that door is more so on the justice side of things. Food justice. When you are in your mid to late teens, early 20s, the sensitivity to the inequities in the world is sharper.
Sure.
And there's like a more of a hunger and a desire to address the problematic things, the toxic things, that's not fair, that's not right, and wanting to do something about it. And so for us, what we saw, particularly in the summer of 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, when all of these people are taking to the streets, and many of them young people who are saying, this is not right, this must change. What we started to do at that time, in addition to joining with what other people were doing, also wanted to say, listen, after the march, we got to eat. And here is a dimension of righting the wrongs of society that perhaps many don't think about. It's the plate. That also is a dimension of injustice. That's a dimension of things that are not fair. And we want to see if you can take that same energy to make this world better and channel it in this direction through that justice lens. That message and that front door, that had younger people started saying, all right, count me in on that. And so it made me say, all right, maybe younger people will not be frontline farmers and all of these gardens that we're starting out. But in terms of framing and understanding what we're doing through the lens of justice, in terms of making sure that we document, take pictures, write about and recruit on campuses with that lens, we're finding greater momentum in that direction with younger people. And it couldn't come at a better time, because many of our churches, similar to what you just referenced about, food bank community, in the church community, the tectonic plates are shifting. Religious landscape in this country is changing. Now, some are very worried and saying our churches are emptying out. We have these big buildings and the dwindling number of people how are we going to maintain all of these assets? And a lot of churches have already sold their buildings, and now it's a parking lot or a brewery or a coffee house or something. But I'm excited by what some congregations are doing to reimagine what ministry can look like, and utilizing what they have, building on their legacy to say, this gardening, this farming stuff, that's ministry too. I mean, I don't want to take you to Sunday school today, but for those who've ever been to any kind of religious setting and gotten kind of point of reference here, the Bible and many, if not most of our holy books is a very agrarian book from beginning to end. The very beginning of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, it's in the Bible, it's the garden.
Yeah.
And the very first row, I'm getting excited also. Here we go. The very first job that God ever gives humanity is what? Grow food. Oh my goodness. And so, I mean, that kind of stuff, I'm getting chills as I talk about it because it's been there the whole time. But maybe my lenses, our life together, society, sometimes it's just timing. It's getting fresh revelations on things. And I'm like, it's been right here.
Right.
And my urbanized inner city lenses did not sensitize me enough to what that is. But now that I see it, I can't unsee it. And I'm inviting more people to come along those paths and kind of join in and get connected. So that was a whole lot. But in terms of like ways to connect with young adults and young people, I think framing it in those ways has been very impactful.
Right, and that's the value add they're bringing to the table, right? So the two of those can coexist
in
a way that helps you move the movement for
absolutely
an extended period of time. This is a sustainability question.
Yeah, and I think, Carmen, it's not just even can extend the movement. I think it must. I think it.
Yeah.
You know, I think that both and approach is very important, and it's like left foot, right foot, and I think the more that they are dancing together, the bigger the impact. When you can say, listen, in the church, we talk about the seasoned saints. They've been seasoned. The seasoned saints of our churches, who have time, experience, some resource and energy, powerful frontline workers in addressing food insecurity. And when I travel the country and I do all these conferences and stuff, I make sure to talk about Sister Maxine and talk about all the retirees in these congregations. They make up the majority and the backbone of the churches. And oftentimes we're not lifting up the seniors as the leaders, and some of the leaders of addressing food insecurity in our communities. And I want to do my part to say, hey, no, wait a minute. we got to celebrate, recognize, and applaud. And we can see young adults, college students finding their own voice in this space, helping us to learn more and better, and to engage these issues in a world that they will fully inherit, not too many days to come.
But having them both at the same table to share knowledge, right? The experiences, the wisdoms, right? The ability to kind of pass on those experiences, pass on their learnings, right? That's going to make that younger generation even that much more powerful too. So that's the link that gets created here. That's kind of an intangible, but it's a huge value to it.
And it goes so much deeper than food.
Yeah,
because those intergenerational connections start touching on other aspects of life.
Right.
And just how to figure out. And it's wonderful when I see this happening, when we're helping each other. It's like, here, take my phone. How do I do that thing?
Right.
Or on the other side is, hey, I'm going through a breakup and I don't know how to bounce back from something that I did not think could happen. And somebody who's lived a little bit of life, seasoned saint, can say, hey, it's going to be all right. It's going to be fine. So it's a beautiful thing to see, which is why I think it's so much. This is a wonderful on-ramp and runway to something that I think our world needs more.
Yeah. Awesome. Well put.
Yeah.
So how did our relationship start from your vantage point? What prompted you to establish a dialogue? How did we get going? I know you started a conversation, I think, with Meg Kimmel initially a couple of years ago, but this has blossomed into something that's going to have really potential for even more. But
absolutely. Yeah. So years ago, I connected with the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future, and they have been wonderful partners for us and for me in my own personal journey. It was through a program at Hopkins called the Food and Faith Program. They invited me to be a part of this advisory group with religious leaders to address issues around hunger in the city of Baltimore. And I had just started this garden at the church. but being a part of that group helped to widen my lens a little bit more. And my relationship with them started, and this is many, many years ago now. And one of the people I met there was Ann Palmer, dynamic partner there at Hopkins at the Center for a Livable Future. And I'm talking with her and others at Hopkins about, hey, this is what my idea is. This is what I'm trying to do. And they've taken the journey with me. They've done things like a map of where our church gardens are in Baltimore and overlaid that with the healthy food priority zones in the city so that we can kind of measure our proximity to these spaces and places. And I'm grateful that the more that we're doing our work, our green dots of food growing churches is beginning to overtake the red spaces on the city's map. And I think this kind of stuff is even off the city's radar to a degree, that the maps that they put together that show like food insecurity and healthy food priority zones, they're not accounting sometimes for the congregations that are growing food. They got the pantry, but they're not looking at the fact that this church is also growing food. So we're literally changing the maps as well in the city of Baltimore. But it was the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future who started doing some of those maps for us so that we can kind of chart our way a little bit. And I continued to kind of raise question about what about this? What about that? And eventually it led to a suggestion, reach out to the food bank and connect with Meg. And connected with Meg, and I think it was in the pandemic, wasn't it, Meg? Yeah, we were Zooming in the pandemic. We was, from room to room, just in the pandemic, just starting these conversations about what might be possible in a relationship. And it was a long dance. It was my kind of dance. It was a long dance.
Yeah.
And it was really beautiful. I've heard some veteran community organizers often talk about moving at the speed of trust and how important it is to move at the speed of trust. And sometimes there's a impulse to jump out and do something. And I was very, cautious about just jumping out and doing, because I think there's a lot of energy for that sometimes. But sometimes the quicker you jump out, the quicker it fizzles. There's something to be said about letting some things marinate. And so we were letting this relationship marinate, just Zooms, just talking, just Zooms, like old school courting, as my grandparents would talk about courting. we were organizationally courting.
Yes.
And in time, after multiple, not only one-on-one meetings, but then meetings where other people are being invited to join the conversation, eventually what emerged was an invitation to come down and see the space. And brought the team down here, we did a tour, and it was amazing. I met Rick, and the walking encyclopedia of food logistics in my brain anyway. And I remember pulling you off to the side with some questions like, hey man, how'd you do this? And how do you figure out that? And it was medicine to my soul to connect with somebody so willing to just share. Here's how, think about this, think about that. So that was wonderful. And then the opportunity came to connect around the neighborhood impact opportunity. And that's been so wonderful as I look at Azaria here.
What's that done for you all?
Oh my goodness. It's been amazing. Well, first, thank you so much for that support with the neighbor impact. It's really helped us to put some flesh to the bones of an idea that we have been looking at in ways that food charity and food justice could dance together. In what ways could that happen? Now, we had hunches, but really not sure. And so this partnership and having one of our team members here and working here and learning here, and then Azaria's coming back and teaching me, and so that intergenerational, as much as I think I'm still 20-something, Azaria reminds me I'm not. And so, but even that intergenerational learning, I'm depending on her. We had some very direct conversations before we kind of settled, and it took a little longer. I think you all ready to kind of move forward with things. We were like, wait, we're still checking, because we wanted to make sure that whoever we sent here had the sight, the sensitivity, the perspective to really be a sponge and soak it up, but also get to a podium and teach and share too. So Azaria is one of the leaders, the young adult leaders of our organization because of this partnership. And we're learning more and more about not only operations, but at least philanthropy and just so much. Thank you. Azaria does her best impersonation of y'all when she comes to meet with me, and she breaks it down and teaches me. And then we have this wonderful opportunity to kind of see, okay, well, how can this dance with that? And how, and it's not that we'll be able to check every single box and do every single thing, but I'm excited about maybe a blueprint that's being created around how food charity and food justice can be dance partners. So what started out as just one-on-one Zooming is growing now to more organizational dancing together.
That's awesome. A couple comments I want to follow up on a couple of things you said. Moving at the speed of trust is a very powerful statement. I love it. And I think it's something that we take very seriously with regard to the food bank, because especially during COVID, right? There's a lot of people who entered into this space about saying, hey, I want to help people, and all well-intentioned. Sure. Not at all trying to disparage that, but we need people who are serious about this for the long term.
That's right.
Right. And so this moving at the speed of trust, you demonstrate to us, we demonstrate to you, like we're not looking for a quick fix here. This is something for us to get to know each other, something to understand each other. Are we really kind of committed? Are we ready to take this journey? And so that's a critical point. That's a critical piece of relationship building, right? And so for us, it's intentional and unintentional. Sometimes it's just because we, as a large organization, sometimes it just happens. But I think it's very intentional in the sense of making sure, because we feel good about the relationship that we've created, we've established for ourselves, and the role that we play in the communities all across our state, as you do for what you've done. So you need to make sure you're working with organizations who are aligned, organizations who are going to represent you very effectively, and vice versa. So I'm glad that the journey, you stayed with the journey, and demonstrates your commitment to this thing from a long-term perspective. The other thing that it's for me, just as you were speaking, really reinforced something that there's another example of really appreciating the impact that we can have as an organization. So you've talked about what you're trying to do is beyond just providing food, right? And so we also are moving beyond an organization as just a distributor of a food distribution organization, right? That's something we've done for 40-something years, and still 1 in 3 Marylanders are struggling with food insecurity. So clearly, just us pushing food out the door, which is probably, if we put a pencil to it, I don't know, a couple 100 million meals in 40-something years, maybe more. And the problem is still particularly large, right? So we need to be thinking differently about how we approach this work. Right. And this is where some of the work that we're doing together is going to help. But what I also begin to appreciate is the impact that we can have on other organizations. You referenced how we've connected here. So we have a grant program, right? And so we have several ways in which we try to support organizations all across our state. And this grant was just more about systems change, right? This is one aspect of the granting program. So we can help organizations achieve what they're trying to achieve. Right. And we have a role to play in that. We have a role that we can play with regard to mentoring. Shared learnings, right? So hopefully she's coming out of here with a better sense of what sourcing looks like and how to manage food inflow and outflow and all those kind of things that hopefully will help your organization grow. We have the ability to influence purchasing. We buy $25 million worth of food a year, unfortunately, right? Post-COVID. And so our ability to use those dollars to support local organizations, to provide opportunities for jobs, to build stronger communities. So the impact that we have goes well beyond the food we distribute into our communities, which is something we're very proud of and we'll continue to do.
Absolutely.
But what we're focused on now is finding other ways to help, to support, to lift. And we can't do that alone, but we do have a certain strength as an organization to be able to have a big influence in that. And so partnering with organizations like yours is exactly what we want to do more and more of.
Awesome.
Because we're all in this together, right? It takes a village. Your network that you're creating, the solutions you're creating are going to be helping our ability to someday put both of our organizations out of business.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we will celebrate that day.
Exactly. We will celebrate that day. So, a lot of our conversations is around building a more equitable, resilient, and accessible food system for Marylanders. You've extended beyond Maryland with regard to your mission, but talk a little about kind of how you look at that, right, in terms of what you're all trying to accomplish with your work in that space.
Yeah, so I'm referenced and mentioned asset-based community development, and that's really a big flag that waves in the air of our organization. Connected to what you just said about, the day when, we do this work so well that it puts both of us out of business. I think that with that in mind, we try to always be thinking about how are we helping to put wind to the sails of what's already moving or that has some energy in local communities. Think about another quote that that often kind of makes me sit and reflect, that says, those who are closest to the problem are often closest to the solution, but furthest away from the resources.
I never heard the
And
back I never heard the back half of that.
yeah, the gentleman who shared that quote, he tweeted some time ago and put emphasis on that back half, because he said when people say it, they leave out the resources side.
I never heard that.
Yeah, so but that helps us to think about how do we strengthen and grow the capacity. So when I think about many of your partners are faith-based organizations, and I talked about the tectonic plate shifting and moving, and a lot of religious leaders and denominations are trying to figure out, where do we go from here? What's happening in local faith-based organizations has impact to the Maryland Food Bank. Because if these spaces do not have the capacity to keep that pantry going, or so some of you who've been in religious groups long enough, oftentimes 20% of the people do 80% of the work. In my tradition, we call it the faithful few. and that faithful few post-pandemic has become even fewer, while the need has gotten greater. And so one of the things that we're seeing is we got to be willing to strengthen and grow the capacity of these local churches, even if every single thing we do with them does not have to do with their garden.
Yes.
Because I can't even get to the garden if you can't get your Zoom set up for your services on Sunday. And if you don't have your Zoom set up for your services on Sunday, the announcement about the pantry is not going out. It's all connected. And as much as sometimes we like to think and move in very bifurcated ways, where things are kind of, this is your box, this is your box. The reality is we live a very interconnected life. I'm emailing Megan when I'm driving in, because my son had a field trip this morning, had to be to school earlier, and traffic is what it is. I'm on 2 wheels coming down 95 trying to get here in time for this, and gave it heads up. I might be late. I'm pushing. I'm trying my best, and that little red pickup truck is on 2 wheels going down 95. And I'm sharing that to say, I'm not just Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III, the director of the blah, blah, blah. I'm a dad. And the support that I can get as a dad, and the support that I need as a dad, is very much so connected to my ability to sit in this chair and talk like I got some sense about the work that I do. And that's for all of us. And so when it comes to the ways that we're trying to work with our churches more and more, is we're trying to be sensitive and listen to what they are saying the need is. And then based on what we're hearing from them, how do we support them in the way that they're saying they need to be helped? Now, I hear some of the traditional kind of nonprofit wisdom that I've heard over the years is, wait a minute, that's mission creep. Mission creep, you're going to start doing, And I think that there's some wisdom there. But I also think that if we start thinking about ways to weave webs of collaboration and partnership, it won't require the Maryland Food Bank to become the Maryland Transportation Bank, or the Maryland Housing Bank, or the Maryland Economic Support Bank. You can stay the food bank, but what we've created now is a constellation, a web, that, okay, we don't do that, but we know this group over there, they do that very well. They're a partner of ours. We're in a relationship. We took the time to make sure there was a worldview and a theory of change that aligned. And so we want to connect you with that particular partner. And not just say, here's that number, go call them, but more so, let's get in the room together. Because whatever they do to support you, us knowing about that is important, so that we can stay with our finger to the wind about where we might need to shift and what we're doing too. So I think it's going to require a lot in all of our organizations to think more creatively about, again, not drifting away from what your central mission is. I think, staying in the sweet spot of your organizational genius makes a lot of sense to me. And knowing that there are other voices in the choir that you can be calling on, because you've taken the time to connect, organize, and establish relationships.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talk about ending hunger, right? Ending hunger takes more, it takes all what you just described, you know? And so, and to your point, when we've on this journey of this addressing root cause of hunger, right? As I'm not going to say an extension of our mission, it's core to our mission, right? And so again, going back to our partner network through symposiums and other communication vehicles to start talking about what that looks like, right? But realizing that we can't just say it. We have to we have to back it up in some way, shape, form in terms of our own actions. We have to back it up in terms of providing access to grants and other supports to allow them to take care of the basics sometimes so they can think bigger.
Right.
Like I can't think out here, Carmen. I got to deal with opening and closing my building, right? And so we got to give them capacity to do that.
Yeah.
And in capacity, and then we also provide, opportunities for folks to think about more systemic change. And I think that's our role. And then it goes beyond financial. It's best practices, right? It's access to volunteers, things that we can help marshal for resources. It's making connections, right? So maybe it's you and I and another organization now gets together from terms of where this potentially goes. And so again, that's just kind of a build and a build and a build. And so,
I love it.
I think that's the real power of what we're both trying to approach here while we stay true to the core of what we're doing in terms of food distribution. Because people in this state have come to expect access to food, as much access to food. Now, what we got to do is think differently about what that access looks like. Right.
Yeah.
And so for a long time, we tended to kind of spread food a little bit like peanut butter, right, across the state. We look at the county level and we say, we want to put so much in this county, put this in this county. And we don't understand what's happening at the community level. We don't know. We're not close enough to it.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a shift that we've made organizationally, going back to what you were talking about, but to better understand the needs in respective communities within communities, right? Get smaller, more micro, right? And the only way we do that, one way as we continue to work on that, is getting more input, more data, more voice, whether that's from a partner, so more and more opportunities for us to engage with our partner network, to hear about what they're doing, create collaborations, build relationships in the communities that they serve. Because oftentimes they're just so focused on the mission, they don't realize to your point, your church is next door to each other. We got pantries next door to each other, open the exact same time maybe, or whatever it might be, right? So how do we kind of leverage that network? And so, and then we talk about neighbor voice, right? So how do we reach into the communities directly from folks? And that starts to influence our programmatic response. It influences the quality of the food we distribute, when we distribute, how we distribute it. And so all that, I think, elevates the experience, I think, ultimately, that we are trying to create for neighbors in need together, similar to what you're trying to do. And that's why I think this partnership is so dynamic. And I think that's why this partnership has real potential for it to continue to grow. But it's a shift for us. It's a shift from, I'm going to hesitate to say this with donors in the room, as an organization that's focused on efficiency to more about fairness. And there's a cost to that.
Oh my goodness.
Right? For a long time, food banking has been get as much food out the door as quickly as you can, as efficiently as you can. And look at us, right? But the story is different. It's not about how much food. Is it the right kind of culture you prefer? Is it nutritious? Is it accessible? And then what's the best? We should be agnostic to the programmatic response that's offered in the community. But if we understand the needs of the community, we'll know what the right solution is. And so we bring up the right program into that same place. All that costs more to do. But if we're ultimately going to make an impact in where we want to go organizationally, and that's the path we have to take. I'm convinced of it. Our organization is committed to it. And that's the kind of dynamic you're seeing, I hope, as you're interacting in terms of why relationships like this are important to us.
Absolutely. I think, one, I want to commend you because you're right. There is a cost to that shift. But oftentimes when I think about the cost of shift, I think about also the higher cost of inaction.
Right.
There's a higher cost. The bill will become due. At some way, shape, or form. And the question is, do we want to get in front of that with a proactive spirit to say, this is something that we are excited about, the opportunity to reimagine ourselves in the future, right? Or be frozen into an inaction that you will ultimately pay for in ways that you may not want to. I mean, this is the same kind of sermon, actually, I'm preaching to a lot of religious leaders as they're seeing their congregations dwindle. Or they're saying, no, we're not doing online. Serving God means you got to come through that door and sit down. I'm like, all right, Bishop, you can sit up if you want to. But wait a few years and you're going to be in here by yourself.
Nobody's coming.
Your own family's watching online in some other church. So those types of things, I'm sensitive. I'm being a little facetious, but I'm sensitive to how difficult it can be to shift. As a cartoonist in the paper I saw, and they drew just 2 slides, and one of them said, there was somebody standing before a crowd of people, and it said, "Who wants change?" And every hand went up. And then the second was, "Who wants to change?" And every hand went down. The reality is we are creatures of habit. We do things a certain kind of way. And it can be very difficult to do the shifts personally or organizationally that you're talking about. But I want to commend y'all for even having the conversation and leaning into the discomfort. My Jesuit sisters and brothers taught me about leaning into this discomfort some years ago when I was doing a lot of teaching at Loyola. And they talk about how while the impulse might be to do this with something unfamiliar, different, or new, you can learn so much more by leaning into it and having your judgment turn to wonder. So instead of jumping to a conclusion about something that is unfamiliar to you and saying, they're doing that, I don't know why they're doing that, they're doing it that way, it's wrong. Flipping to wonder says, I wonder why they do it that way and not that. Maybe they know something I don't know about it. And so y'all are doing some heavy lifting and some hard work. I think it's the right thing, though. I really, honest to goodness, I do. Because I think every organization, especially on this side of the pandemic, has to be having these kind of conversations. Right. And in this kind of world, has to be having these kind of conversations about how to make the necessary organizational shifts. And this was not on my mental script to share, but I'm going to share that one of the shifts that's hitting us is that we're shifting from leaning as much into being like an organization for to a network of. And the implications of that for me, and I shared it with Azaria and the other fellows this past Saturday. I no longer pastor the church, Pleasant Hope Baptist Church. This is 2 years, this coming May, 2 years post that wonderful opportunity there at the church. And I'm back serving alongside my dad, who's the senior pastor, and I help him out, along the way. But the thing that really made my heart sing, and the real reason that I felt God was calling me to step down from pastoring, was because my love and passion for growing food and farming was going through the roof. I was posting on my pastor page, me driving refrigerated trucks, delivering produce to communities and, singing as I'm driving up and down the road. And it became so obvious. During the week, I'm in the garden. You want to meet with me? Fine, meet me in the garden. It became so obvious to the church and to me that when I finally announced that I was stepping down, one of the deacons summed it up well. He said, "Pastor, we're sad, but we're not surprised." They saw how my heart was singing to be closer to land, growing food. I mean, one of the silver linings of the pandemic, and many of us had silver linings that happened. And for me, slower life, closer to the land, growing food. I was healthier mentally, emotionally, physically. I'm more present to my family. It was beautiful. And stepping away from the church to lead the organization full time, all of the things that come with being an executive director come with it. You're raising money, you're doing the meetings, you're putting out fires, you're, strategizing, doing the newsletter, especially when you're a startup. Anybody who run a startup, you do all the things. Now, thankfully, as a preacher's kid, I'm used to doing all the things, but I'm doing all the things. And this year, this is a fresh shift, a fresh revelation and crystallization, is I want to be more back on the land. That's the thing that got people saying, "Hey, have you heard about Heber Brown?" They're not asking about Heber Brown because he's such a great executive and this, that, and the other. They hear about this preacher that's out there growing food and singing the plants. And I'm doing more of that now. I'm just beginning to shift it. And so what it means is putting more support and resource behind Azaria and the other young adults who want to lead and do things. It means me releasing some things and saying, listen, sometimes even good ideas need to be put on the shelf for the right time. That's tough. It means me saying, I've called my pastor buddies around the city and said, "Hey, I want to grow more food around Baltimore. you got some land. Can I just come grow food on your land?
Mhm.
And them saying, sure, come on. And so that's more of where my heart is. And so becoming more of a network for us means I'll do far more connecting, convening, but not flying into this city, this town, that town. No farmer can do that. You can't leave your fields because you got a speaking engagement and circuit. And so y'all pray for me with this book because I don't know how I'm going to keep my peas and my beans growing, and I got to go sell this book. But that's the shift that's happening. I'm getting back to the land and trusting that if we quote those closest to the problem or closest to the solution, we'll act like it then. Act like it. Trust that people, when given room and support, opportunity and resource, trust that they will figure it out.
Right.
You got to have faith in people. And I think all of us can point back to moments in our lives when your back was up against the wall and you had to. And many times when you had to, guess what? You did. There was no choice. You got to figure it out. And not to say you're on your own, but it is to say, I trust that what's in you is enough to help you. And you won't do it by yourself. I'm still with you, but I'm not doing it for you. I'm not going to help you, really, in the long run, if I'm doing it for you. But I will do with. I'm going to be right there, your cheerleader by your side. So you're going to see me more and more. I was tempted to come in my overalls today, Carmen. Listen, I promise you, if you see me in the parking lot, my pickup truck is out there, and I got plants. I got seedlings in the back of my truck because I got some plants.
We'll that in 5 minutes.
Oh my goodness, my boots are in the truck right now. It's gonna rain today. I gotta get my plants in the ground. So that's the shift that's happening with me, and that it's not. And I'm hopeful that in the long run, it's going to help our network really be a network. This year, our theme is let the network work. Trust it. Let the network work. And we're going to learn. We're going to fall off the bike. We're going to stumble. Yes, it's a part of the journey. But in the long run, I don't want to be 30, 40, 50 years from here still quoting these quotes, right? And we still are acting like we don't trust the people that we're in community with. We're still doing it the model and the way that we've always done it. So again, I commend you because it's tough to look at millions of meals, millions that were crucial at moments of great need and support, corporate partners, this, that, you got all this stuff going. So it's like when I stepped down from pastoring, it was like, what happened? I was like, nothing. People are used to pastors leaving when it's like drama or stress or some type of scandal. Oh my goodness. And I was like, no, things are actually good. and 14 years in the Black church tradition, you don't really become the pastor until like 7, 8 years in. That might even go beyond the Black church tradition. I got a sneaky suspicion. But in terms of really having the capital to really lead, that's about 7 years in, right? I'm at 14 years. I was good. Could have rode that thing all the way into the sunset. And people are like, what is wrong? My pastor buddies think I'm crazy. Like, what is wrong with you? I was like, man, I got to follow my heart. And I think the times that we're living in require sometimes steps of faith and sometimes leaps of faith. And I just have been one that's like, all right, let's just jump and see what happens. And then if I say I believe in God, I'm going to trust that God is going to carry me through and we'll figure this out.
That's awesome.
So Farmer Brown up next.
There you go. Our next coffee talk. And we got to get you back in our garden. So we started a garden in the back, teaching garden. You probably saw it, hopefully, on your tour. And so again, that's examples of what you were talking about earlier. Of just you don't need large acreage, right? And you don't need even grass and dirt, right? There's ways to grow through very creative means, and that's part of what we're trying to educate back there, so that people don't get intimidated by the fact, well, I don't have enough space. Right. Just start with something.
That's right.
And but your comment about becoming a network of and trusting, the network you've developed, what was it, 250 strong, right? Yes. You have no choice. I'm sorry to tell you.
You're right.
Right? You've grown this thing to a place where you have to trust the network to do what you, as part of your relationship build, have thought you brought to the network. Right. So I think you're a victim of your own success in that regard. And I think I don't see it as a negative, it's a positive, right? In terms of what you've been able to create. Now, harnessing all that power,
Yeah.
getting it aligned,
Yes.
making sure that they're marching kind of somewhat in the same direction with allowing some flex so they can
Sure.
be
Yeah.
what they are to their local communities
Yeah.
is the work going forward. So I think for us, to your point of being a network of, we think differently about what our network is, right?
Sure.
So it's community-based organizations who provide food, but
Right.
now it's the partnerships and relationships that we're establishing,
Mhm.
you know, that are helping us in this journey to increase access, to be more equitable, to address root
Mhm.
causes. That's the network now, right?
Mm.
Very different bodies of work, needs different resources,
Yeah.
needs different expertise,
Yeah.
but that's the collective network that I think we're both trying to build.
That's right.
So that we can, again, attack this holistically.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I love it. And I see us, you're on this end with organizations and partners, and I'm on this end, a more granular end
Yeah.
of it. One of the things that Azari and I talked about was looking at, just looking at Baltimore, the list of your church partners in Baltimore.
mhm,
And what if, and so many things start with just a what if.
mhm.
What if we create a target list that we're going to start gardens at all your partner
How about
churches
that?
and help them to start growing some of the things that's going to their pantries? So we'll do that on the granular level, and y'all are supporting at this level. And when that thing comes closer and closer and closer together, oh my goodness, the
Right.
power that that can have.
Right.
And so that's why I think
You
this.
thought those circles in the mapping? You're talking about that? Those circles just start to
Yes,
grow, right?
Yes.
So there are no gaps.
There are no gaps.
Right.
There
No
are
hunger
gaps.
hotspots.
Yeah, we're covering it
Right.
at the granular level, at the mid level, at the high level,
Right.
policy levels.
Right.
We're covering it.
Yeah. We haven't even talked about that.
Yeah.
Advocacy and the work
Sure.
we all have to do there to try to help make sure that we're getting as much support from every resource we
That's
possibly
right.
can.
That's right.
So
Wow.
what's keeping you up at night these days?
This shift and how to, well, two things. One, finish, writing in the book stuff, but also shifting. I love what you just said. I didn't think about it that way, a victim of my own success. And it makes me think about but one of my mentors, and I'm an Ashoka fellow, and one of my Ashoka fellows, this is global community of social entrepreneurs.
Mm.
And one of my mentors said, Heber, it's not just the job of a social entrepreneur to scale an organization. He said it's also the job to scale the idea.
Mm.
And he talks about how, what he said to me that day made me think about how, we've done a pretty good job of really scaling this idea that faith-based organizations have assets that can be used to address food insecurity in their communities. And I'm grateful that we're scaling this idea, particularly in African-American Christian communities. And that's what my book is about too, the ways that Black churches have always done this kind of work. And when we, urbanized, cityfied thinking has disconnected us from our heritage when it comes to growing food on church land, but it's always been a thing. But, when I think about ways to release it, and, here's some basic kind of, here's a basic understanding. Here's the continuous learning that we'll do.
Mhm.
But I got to let this thing go for it to breathe, to flap its wings and live. In Baltimore, we talk about the black butterfly. I think that black butterfly, the wings of that butterfly can fly. Listen, this is an all-in moment for me. I'm putting it all in. I'm betting on it. I'm riding out on this. That the wings of the black butterfly can flap and fly in ways that will transform not just Black Baltimore, but the entire city and state. I honest to God believe that. And I'm putting it all in on that. I'm going all in that local communities have what they need. Now, what keeps me up is how to do what it is that I'm uniquely gifted to do. To, in some ways, be like a conductor of the orchestra, in other ways, get in there and grow. In other ways, cheerlead from the back. And in other ways, get out of the way. Shoot, that last one was hard. Knowing when it's time to get out of the way. And my young adults, our fellows, are helping me to learn that there are some things I just need to get out of the way on. So while I appreciate you referenced at the beginning, I know we've got to wrap up soon, the Feeding America, great. I had a great time out there. in Chicago at their headquarters, their Chicago office rather, talking about this work and what we do. I am just as excited to be here because there I was talking about the ideas and here we're talking about implementation. And I'm always going to be more jazzed by what are we doing? Let's try something. We might fall on our face and embarrass ourselves, but didn't we learn along the way? Wasn't it fun? And won't we be able to help those coming behind us to avoid some potholes? You know, so those are the things that that keeps me up. I'm thinking about it, and I'm growing in my own faith to trust that my Quaker system. I'm very interfaith and ecumenical. My Quaker family, they talk about that of God in people. That's the language they use. That of God. And so I'm growing in my own confidence that of God in each person and however that expresses itself is a necessary ingredient to the sustainable gumbo that we can create together that can really solve it. And our collective retirement party is going to be the best celebration. But I got a hunch that when we really get to the root and fix this, the next emerging thing will be inviting us to bring those same new muscles we just learned that used to now apply it to that thing, or at least point the way and drop breadcrumbs to those coming behind to say, hey, learn from the ways that not only we succeeded, learn from the ways we messed up. Don't go that way. Here's the way that we think will be best, but y'all figure it out. So that's what my thoughts are.
Well, we're excited about joining you on that journey, my friend.
Let's take it.
Thank you for taking some time today. I think we're going to